What makes a good person do something terrible? Why do kind, ethical, and compassionate individuals sometimes cross the line into darkness? Is evil something we're born with, a seed waiting for the right conditions to grow, or is it shaped by external forces we can't always control? This isn't just a philosophical question, it's a psychological reality backed by chilling experiments and historical events. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment and Stanley Milgram's obedience studies reveal the disturbing truth. The line between good and evil is thinner than we'd like to believe. But this video isn't just about history or theory, it's about you. How vulnerable are you to these forces? Could you resist them, or would you succumb like so many others have? Let's explore the dark psychology behind human behavior and discover how even the most virtuous among us can be led astray. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most infamous experiments in psychology. Participants were instructed to deliver electric shocks to an unseen person whenever they answered questions incorrectly. Unbeknownst to the participants, the shocks weren't real, but the person's screams were. What was real was the participants' willingness to obey. Under the authority of a stern, lab-coated figure, 65% of participants administered what they believed were potentially lethal shocks. They weren't sadists or sociopaths. They were ordinary people who believed they were simply following orders. Milgram's study revealed the terrifying power of authority. When we perceive someone as legitimate and knowledgeable, we often surrender our moral judgment. This blind obedience isn't just a historical anomaly, it's a deeply ingrained psychological tendency. And it raises a disturbing question. How often do we prioritize obedience over ethics in our own lives? If you think you'd never fall victim to group pressure, think again. Solomon Ash's conformity experiments in the 1950s showed just how easily we abandon our own perceptions in the face of group consensus. In Ash's study, participants were asked to match line lengths, an obvious and easy task. But when Confederates intentionally gave the wrong answer, participants often conformed, agreeing with the incorrect majority. The fear of standing out or being wrong overpowered their own senses. This tendency to conform isn't just about avoiding embarrassment, it's about survival. Throughout human history, aligning with the group meant safety and acceptance. But in modern society, this instinct can lead to moral compromise. Think about it. How often do we stay silent in the face of wrongdoing just because everyone else does? One of the most dangerous psychological mechanisms behind human cruelty is dehumanization. When we stop seeing others as people and start viewing them as objects, enemies, or lesser beings, empathy disappears, and anything becomes justifiable. The Stanford prison experiment, led by Philip Zimbardo in 1971, demonstrated this chillingly. Volunteers assigned as guards quickly adopted abusive behaviors toward prisoners, who were fellow volunteers. Stripped of their individuality and reduced to their roles, both groups lost sight of their shared humanity. Within days, the situation spiraled into psychological torment. This isn't just an experiment's result, it's a pattern repeated in real-world atrocities. From war crimes to hate crimes, dehumanization enables otherwise ordinary people to commit acts of unimaginable cruelty. It's a sobering reminder of how easily our perception of others can be manipulated, and how dangerous that transformation can be. In 1963, political theorist Hannah Arendt coined the term the banality of evil to describe Adolf Eichmann, a key architect of the Holocaust. Eichmann wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He was a bureaucrat who saw his horrific actions as mere logistics. He wasn't driven by hatred, but by obedience and efficiency. This concept is terrifying because it suggests evil doesn't always wear a sinister face. Sometimes it's found in the quiet compliance of those who choose convenience over conscience. It's the employee who follows unethical orders, the citizen who looks away from injustice, the individual who rationalizes harm as just doing their job. The banality of evil reminds us that moral failure often starts small, with a single compromised principle or a silent acceptance of wrongdoing. And before we know it, those small steps can lead to devastating consequences. Philip Zimbardo calls it the Lucifer effect, the transformation of good people into perpetrators of evil. But what pushes someone over the edge? The answer lies in a perfect storm of psychological forces: obedience, conformity, dehumanization, and moral disengagement. When authority pressures us, when groupthink blinds us, when empathy fades, and when responsibility shifts away from the individual, that's when the line between good and evil starts to blur. And the scariest part? None of us are immune. But awareness is power. By understanding these forces, we can resist them. We can challenge authority when it demands unethical actions, speak up against the crowd when it's wrong, and fight against the dehumanization of others. So what separates those who resist evil from those who succumb to it? It's not a matter of inherent goodness. It's a matter of conscious choice. Moral courage requires vigilance. It means questioning authority, even when it's uncomfortable. It means standing against the tide of conformity, even when it's lonely. And it means recognizing the humanity in others, even when the world tells us not to. The potential for both good and evil lives in all of us. The question isn't whether you have the capacity for cruelty. It's whether you'll have the strength to choose compassion when it matters most. Thanks for listening.